I'm Mara, the caterer who clawed a business out of flour and grit, though my family still treats me like their cash machine. They've mocked my greasy hands, scoffed at my quiet wins, and pocketed my money without a word of thanks. Last weekend, the Elm Street barbecue changed everything. Smoke curled from the grill as my cousin Jessa sneered, "Grab a lawn chair, not a seat," her voice sharp enough to slice. They pledged $3,000 for a playground, grinning, assuming I'd pay. I didn't. I let the silence stretch, then said, "Not this time," and watched them unravel, begging neighbors for coins. Tina, my old shadow, spilled the truth. I'd fed this block through a storm they forgot. Jessa flushed, Dad's eyes glistened, and I felt unstoppable. Curious how I shook off their greedy grip? My story's just starting. Join me. I'm kneading dough in my kitchen, the scent of yeast and thyme swirling around me, when my phone buzzes on the counter. Flour coats my knuckles as I wipe them on my apron and reach for the screen. It's Dad, Martin. His voice crackles through the speaker, shaky and thin, like he's barely holding it together. "Mara, please come to the barbecue on Elm Street tomorrow," he says. "The fundraiser, too. It's for the playground, and we need you there." I freeze, my fingers sticky against the phone. Need me? They've never needed me, just my money. I can still hear Miles's lazy chuckle from years back. He sprawled on Mom's couch and jabbed at my stained apron, saying, "What's that smell? Grease or failure?" Mom, Marianne, stared out the window. Her silence stung more than his words. Jessa's voice cut through Thanksgiving once, sharp and cold. "You're still playing with pots, Mara?" she asked. They've never seen how I turned those pots into a catering business that keeps my lights on, and then some. I lean against the counter, the dough forgotten. My chest tightens with an old ache. Elm Street sits a block away, close enough to smell the grills from my porch, but it feels like a minefield. Every visit brings the same fight. Dad's clumsy hugs, Mom's icy distance, Miles and Jessa's smirks, they all pile on me. I've pulled Miles out of rent holes and patched Mom's crumbling budget. Not once have they thanked me. My hand drifts to a yellowed recipe card tucked under a jar of rosemary. Grandpa Morris's handwriting loops across it. "Mara's bread, best in the county." I see him now, grinning over his chipped mug at the old farm upstate, where he rests under the pines. "You've got magic in those hands, girl," he'd say. His eyes crinkled with pride. He's the only one who ever believed in me, the only one who didn't treat me like a walking wallet. I trace his words, and the ache softens into warmth. Dad's plea lingers in the air, tugging at that spot Grandpa carved out. My gut begs me to stay here, safe in my flour-dusted haven, but my heart won't let me ignore him. I mutter "fine" under my breath, grab my phone and tap out a reply. "I'll be there." The dough sits heavy under my palms as I knead it again, harder now. Each push presses out the dread creeping up my spine. Tomorrow looms like a storm cloud over my quiet little world. I can't shake the feeling that it's going to be more than just a barbecue, more than another favor they'll expect me to fix. I shuffle onto Elm Street, my cooler thumping against my hip, loaded with iced teas I brewed for myself alone. The late afternoon sun glints off scuffed folding tables littered with cracked teacups and faded jigsaw boxes. The air pulses with the snap of sizzling meat and the high-pitched shrieks of kids threading through a jumble of lawn chairs. I'm in my threadbare jeans, sneakers grinding into the patchy grass, when Dad shuffles toward me. His plaid shirt sags on his frame, and his silver-flecked beard catches the light. "Good you're here, Mara," he mutters, his hand brushing my arm in a stilted pat before he turns back to the grill. Smoke coils around him as he prods patties with a furrowed brow. Miles slumps in a creaking chair, legs splayed, a beer bottle glistening with condensation in his fist. He flicks me a glance, his grunt barely audible, then settles back into his fog of disinterest. Jessa glides up next, her sandals tapping the ground, sundress rippling like she's stepping onto a stage instead of a yard dotted with bottle caps. "Nice to see the help show up," she purrs, her smirk slicing through the chatter. Neighbors pause, their red cups hovering, and Mom looks up from fussing with a tray of brownies. Jessa's voice sharpens. "That bench is for donors," she says, nodding to a shaky seat piled with napkins. "So maybe grab a lawn chair instead." The words sear, a spark flaring in my chest, and Miles's hoarse chuckle stokes it hotter. Mom smooths her apron, her eyes darting away, offering no shield, just a twitch of her mouth that says she's already gone. I tighten my grip, lower my cooler to the grass beside the bench, not some rickety chair, and stare Jessa down. Her gaze flickers, but she recovers, flipping her hair as if I'm a speck she's brushed off. I'm not buckling today. My eyes roam past the clutter of chipped planters and knotted jump ropes, catching on Tina at her lemonade stand. Her braid sways as she stirs a pitcher, her apron streaked with lemon drips, and she tosses me that lopsided grin I'd spot in a storm. We used to race bikes down this block, tires buzzing, swapping secrets under the flicker of fireflies. Her wink lands now, a jolt of warmth that steadies my pulse like a rope tossed over a swelling tide. The crowd's hum dims as I square my shoulders, my soles pressing into the lumpy earth. Jessa's still primping, Miles hasn't stirred, and Dad's poking at the grill, lost in his haze. Mom sets her tray down, her fingers restless, but her silence holds firm. A restless churn builds in me, a tide rising under my ribs. This isn't just a barbecue with scorched meat and warm beer. It's a ledge I'm teetering on, stretched between the shadow they cast and the light I've clawed for myself. I clutch my cooler's handle, the chill biting my skin, and sense the turn. They don't feel it yet, but I do. This yard's about to become my battleground. I ease onto a weathered picnic bench, my fingers tracing the rim of a chipped mug filled with iced tea, as twilight spills violet streaks across the barbecue. Lanterns sputter to life, their light dancing unevenly over the yard, while a megaphone's static pierces the evening murmur. "For the playground rebuild!" a voice blasts, and the crowd edges closer, their whispers fluttering like moths in the thick, warm air. Miles lumbers up first, his boots stirring clumps of dirt, and flops a hand upward. $500 for that rusty grill, he mutters, his grin slanting my way, ripe with certainty. Neighbors offer a scattered clap, some hesitant, some sharp, and their gazes flick toward me, heavy with expectation. Mom moves next, her sandals pressing into the damp sod, her voice taut despite the flush creeping up her neck. $800 for the quilt on table 3, she states, smoothing her hair with a brisk sweep, her eyes sliding past me as if I'm a wisp she's taught herself to overlook. The bids surge, a restless swell, and Jessa glides in, her laughter ringing like coins scattering on pavement. $1,700 for the patio set, she sings, twirling a curl, her stare pinning me with a taunting glint. I sip my tea, the cold biting into my palms, and watch their totals climb to $3,000. Their smiles harden, fierce and sure, as if I'm a vault they've already pried open. "Mara's got this, right?" Jessa purrs, her words a silk snare edged with barbs, and a ripple of laughs weaves through the yard, some awkward, some bold. Miles slumps back into his chair, beer sloshing onto the grass, while Mom shifts her stance, her lips twitching in faint approval. Dad shuffles over from the grill, wiping his hands on a frayed rag, and clears his throat. "How's the catering going, Mara?" he asks, his tone faltering, a fragile thread he doesn't think I'll tug. I part my lips, my answer forming slow and deliberate, but Jessa interrupts, her glass thrust high. "To Mara, our sugar mama," she proclaims, and Miles's rough guffaw coils around my chest like a rope. The crowd joins in, their mirth a brittle hum, and I sit steady, rooted as an oak in a squall, letting it roll over me. I recall the times I've folded, Miles's rent wired under moonlight, Mom's car payment slipped beneath her door, all consumed by their mute entitlement. No thanks, no nod, just the promise I'd keep pouring. My mug wavers faintly in my grip, so I steady it before easing it onto the bench, its soft clink drowned by the clamor. A slow heat unfurls in my gut, a flame climbing higher with each smug glance they toss my way. They don't see me, just a silhouette with a purse, a cog in their machine. I lean back, the bench's rough grain digging into my spine, and sweep my gaze across the chaos. Tina sways at her stand, tipping lemonade with a calm hand, and catches my eye with a faint nod that anchors me amid the swell. The pledges hang heavy, a bloated oath they've chained to me, but a pulse quickens in my veins, a beat gathering strength. They think they've pinned me down, but I'm not the Mara who'd break. Not tonight. This isn't their show anymore, it's mine, and they're about to find the rules redrawn. I linger on the picnic bench as dusk settles heavy, the yard alive with the chirp of crickets and the faint rustle of napkins tumbling across tables in the evening's cooling breath. Lanterns swing above, their golden light quivering over the crowd, now quiet as Tina steps out from her lemonade stand, her voice ringing clear like a chime in the stillness. "Time to settle up," she calls, clipboard poised in her grip, her braids swaying as she reads the pledges she'd tallied all night. The air stiffens, a cord stretched tight, and Jessa pivots toward me, her sundress flaring in the glow like a spark against the gloom. "Your cue, big spender," she says, her smirk a sliver of ice, crisp and cutting, as she slides the clipboard my way with a theatrical sweep. The crowd presses closer, their whispers threading through the silence, some shifting uneasily, one coughing low, while kids peek from behind wobbly chairs. Miles's idle gaze sharpens, Mom's eyes flicker, and Dad's stooped shuffle all lock onto me, their $3,000 burden dangling like a yoke they expect me to shoulder. I draw a slow breath, the aroma of trampled grass and fading sweetness filling my chest, and stand, my sneakers rooting into the soil like vines staking a claim. "I never said I'd cover it," I say, my voice steady, smooth as a blade honed on patience, and the words drop like stones into a glassy lake. For a heartbeat, the yard holds its breath, a fragile pause, before chaos spills out. Miles lurches up, his beer bottle thudding to the earth, foam seeping into the dust. "What?" he blurts, his face twisting as if I've unraveled his world. Mom's hand leaps to her throat, her gasp a brittle crack, while Dad stumbles over his words. "Mara, we can't, you know we—" his plea fraying into silence. Jessa's laugh splits the air, shrill and splintered, a sound like porcelain smashing on stone. "You're kidding," she snaps. "You owe us." Her stare burns, but I meet it, unwavering, my frame a pillar against their gale. "You've banked on my pride too long," I reply, each word a chisel striking granite. "Pay your own debts." The yard ignites, a clamor of voices, neighbors murmuring, some exchanging glances, as kids crane their necks. Miles digs into his pockets, coins clinking like marbles in a tin, while Mom spins to the crowd, her tone wavering. "We'll sort it. Just give us a second." Her hands darting like moths caught in a jar. Dad's rag twists in his fists, his features sagging, and Jessa lunges closer, her finger slicing the air. "Your family! You can't just walk away!" she hisses, but I move past her, the grass brushing my calves, cool and slick against my skin. I thread through the clutter of tables, past heaps of cracked dishes and drooping flowers, until I reach Tina's stand. She tips a glass of lemonade with a steady pour, her calm a beacon in the fray, and hands it to me with a wink that shines like a lantern-piercing fog. "Knew you'd do it," she whispers, her words a lifeline threading through the din. I take the glass, the citrus bite sharp on my lips, and glance back at the yard. Jessa stomps, her sandals churning dust, while Miles haggles with a neighbor, his voice climbing in a frantic arc. Mom's pleas dissolve into the night, and Dad stands frozen, staring after me, his form dwindling in the lantern's haze. The burden lifts, a knot untying, and I feel the earth firm beneath me, my heartbeat a rhythm I've reclaimed. They're scrambling now, their tower of expectations toppling, and I'm already past it. This isn't their win to steal, it's mine, carved from the ashes of their own collapse. I stand beside Tina's lemonade stand, the glass chilling my palm, as night drapes its silken shroud over Elm Street. The barbecue's din softens to a faint buzz, overtaken by the shiver of leaves in the wind and the gentle groan of lantern chains rocking above. Tina rests against her table, her apron puckered with lemon smudges, and tilts her head, her eyes glinting like river pebbles under the moon's gleam. "You remember that storm 2 summers back?" she asks, her voice low, weaving through the quiet like a thread through a loom. I nod, the memory rising, sharp as the rain that battered this block when I'd hauled pots through the deluge, a time I'd hinted at in tougher days. She stands taller, her fingers brushing the pitcher, and pivots to the yard, her tone rising just enough to drift. "Mara fed us all then," she says, lugged trays of soup and bread through the torrent when the power flickered out. Her words spill outward, a whisper unfurling into a breeze, and I see it unfold. My boots churning mud, steam curling from broth I'd simmered all night, my shoulders burning as I handed bowls to neighbors huddled under dripping eaves. Jessa had lounged on her steps, her curls untouched, sneering, "Who'd touch that mush?" While Miles sprawled indoors, his phone's glow his only concern. I'd pressed on, rain stinging my face, fueled by a quiet will to hold us together. Tina's eyes roamed the crowd, her voice firm. She didn't take a penny, just kept us fed when the dark closed in. The yard stirs, a murmur rippling through, some frowning before their faces ease, like sunlight breaking through fog. And I spot Mrs. Grady, her gnarled fingers tightening on her cup, nodding with a slow, remembering tilt. Jessa halts, her sandals digging into the sod, her lips parting in a silent gape, a flush climbing her throat like vines twisting up a trellis. Miles sinks deeper, his hands hovering over empty pockets, his mutter lost in the wind's sigh. Mom's arms fall, her brownie tray abandoned on a table, her eyes shimmering as she stares at the earth, a figure softened by a sudden melt. Dad turns from the grill, his rag slipping to the ground, his jaw dropping as if Tina's truth has unhooked him. For a moment they stand frozen, pinned by her words, and I feel their stillness, a wave pulling back to bear what they'd overlooked. My chest knots, not with fury now, but with a fragile, piercing warmth. I'd borne that storm alone, not for thanks, but because it was mine to weather. Tina edges nearer, her shoulder grazing mine, and whispers, "They didn't see it then, but they can't miss it now." Her breath carries a hint of zest, a steady comfort, and I sip my lemonade, its bite anchoring me as the yard holds its quiet. The memory recedes, yet its resonance hums, a cord binding me to this street, these faces, in a way they can't erase. Jessa's flush darkens, Miles grumbles under his breath, and Mom's lips quiver, but they stay rooted, caught in the light Tina's cast. Dad's gaze finds mine, unguarded and seeking, and I meet it briefly before turning away. The night deepens, a cool gust brushing my arms, and I feel broader somehow, not just unbound, but revealed. This isn't their tale to reshape, it's mine, woven from the rain they'd let slip until this moment. I pivot from Tina's stand, my lemonade glass drained, and step into the night's cool clasp, the air grazing my skin with a hint of dew and the subtle drift of wood smoke curling from spent coals. Elm Street unfurls ahead, a path of dusk and shimmer beneath the moon's quiet gaze, its outlines blurring as the barbecue's clamor dwindles to a chorus of crickets and whispering boughs. I grip my cooler, its heft a steady friend, and murmur to Grandpa Morris, my words soft, "You'd have cheered this, old man." His memory glows, a gentle thrum in my ribs, his gravelly chuckle ringing from days we'd shuck peas on his stoop, the world clear and kind. I don't glance back at first, but the racket surges, a raw knot of voices slicing the stillness. Jess's heels gouge the sod, her cries piercing as she thrusts her dangling earrings at a neighbor. "Take these, they're real silver!" Miles's rasp climbs, rough and urgent, as he yanks off his watch, its scratched face catching the lantern's sway. "This'll cover something!" Mom's appeals thread through, faint and tattered. "We'll make it right, I promise," her form flitting among tables like a sparrow lost in a squall. Dad's shout rises last, a fractured call. "Mara, wait!" But it fades, thin as I pass the oak's twisted silhouette, my sneakers scraping the curb in a measured rhythm. The yard melts into a patchwork of flickers, lanterns spilling weak light over their frenzy, their shapes dwindling amid sagging chairs and drooping streamers. I reach the oak at the corner, its rugged arms arching high, and feel the bond break, a strand I'd borne too long dissolving into mist. My breath clouds in the crisp air, each puff a release of their hold, their outlines flaking away like rust from a forgotten gate. Tina's figure holds steady at her stand, her grin a sliver of radiance as she lifts her glass in a silent toast, a nod to the threshold I've breached. The streetlights buzz above, their beams spilling onto the pavement, guiding me toward my house, a low shape at the street's end. I picture the kitchen there, its shelves empty, its piece mine to shape, and a soft surge courses through me, a tide free of their pull. Jess's wails shrink to a whimper, Miles's bartering dims, and Mom's begging drifts into the breeze, but Dad's voice lingers, a distant tug at my seams. I halt for a breath, then let it slip, my stride resuming, solid as stone settling into earth. The night enfolds me, its expanse a tapestry I've seized, and I feel buoyant, not merely unshackled, but full. They're behind me, grappling with their tangle, their cries a fading gale I've outpaced. This isn't their road anymore, it's mine, laid with the clarity that I've cast their burden aside, a liberty chiseled from the quiet they can't reach. I rise to sunlight weaving through my kitchen blinds, a warm braid spilling over the counter where I rest my spatula, its grip smoothed by years of coaxing meals from scraps. Elm Street stirs outside, a faint chorus of lawnmowers and chirping finches, but I'm rooted here, shaping dough for a catering job, my fingers dancing in a cadence I've earned. Days after the barbecue, I gather the gig's tips, a handful of wrinkled notes, and tuck them into a jar for the kids' clinic, a cause I'd nodded to when the playground talk first hummed. I whisper to Grandpa Morris, "This one's yours." My voice soft, his presence a steady glow in my marrow, his trust a lodestar from days we'd husk corn on his stoop, the sun gilding our hands. My phone pings, Miles's name flashing, his text a curt rasp. "Sorry about that night." Rough and halting like a twig snapping underfoot. I leave it unanswered, its pull no longer mine to bear. Mom stays hushed, her quiet a veil drawn across the hours, but Dad trudges to my door one dawn, his cap crumpled in his fists, his voice gravelly. "Can we talk, Mara?" His eyes, shadowed and damp, hold mine for a fleeting beat, a spark of old campfire tales flickering there, and I nod, not for them, but for the echo of who we once were. I offer no words yet, so I turn to my dough, its give a vow I mold with care. Jess's silence looms, her pride a fortress unyielded, but Tina texts a tidbit. "Heard Jess's still hawking those earrings." A ripple of gossip swirling like petals caught in a gust. I step onto my porch, the air sharp with autumn's first nip, and eye my house's weathered siding, its lines softened by seasons, a reflection of the life I've forged beyond their reach. The clinic jar gleams on my shelf, a quiet torch beside Grandpa's recipe card, its script faded yet firm, and I smile, a bend as gentle as a stream over stones. This street, this stillness, belongs to me now, not a platform for their wants, but a haven where I stand complete, my value no longer a toll to pay. They're out there, picking through their ruins, their echoes dulled by the space I've etched, and I'm here, pressing onward, my hands weaving a tomorrow they can't touch. The world spins, bright and unbound, and I'm woven into it, anchored in a truth they'll never unmake. I see it now, clear as dawn spilling over Elm Street's rooftops. My worth isn't a coin I owe anyone, it's a flame I nurture for myself, kindled that night they begged and bartered at the barbecue, when I learned family isn't a leash I'm bound to wear. I walked away freer, fuller, cradling Grandpa's trust and my own spine. They're still out there, patching their pride with scraps, but I've found my ground, unshaken by their echoes. What about you? Have you ever faced down someone's expectations, family or not, and claimed your own strength? I'd love to know. Share your fights, your wins, in the comments below. Let's trade some honest sparks. This chapter's done, but I've got more brewing, so stick around, keep stoking your own light. I'll catch you next time with another story to tell.